What happens when the perfect life is a perfect lie? For 10 years, Dr. Irene Parker and billionaire tycoon Alexander Sterling were the city's golden couple. They had the penthouse, the prestige, and the power. But at the most lavish yacht party of the year, celebrating his biggest triumph, Alexander decided to unveil his new future. With his wife standing just feet away, he introduced his young mistress to a crowd of investors and socialites as the next Mrs. Sterling. He thought his wife would crumble in silence. He never expected she would pick up the microphone. This isn't just a story of infidelity, it's the story of a woman who refused to be erased and the epic war that followed. The air in the penthouse was a perfect temperate 72 degrees, a manufactured climate that held no memory of the sweltering city streets 80 floors below. It was an atmosphere of impeccable control, a quiet hum of expensive machinery that mirrored the life Dr. Irene Parker and Alexander Sterling presented to the world. From their panoramic windows, New York City was a silent, glittering jewel box, a kingdom Alexander believed he had conquered and gifted to her. For 10 years, Irene had played the role of its queen with a poise that was both her greatest asset and her heaviest burden. To the public, they were an institution. Alexander Alex Sterling was the swashbuckling real estate mogul, his name a brand synonymous with audacious architecture and ruthless ambition. He didn't just build skyscrapers, he branded skylines. She was Dr. Irene Parker, one of the country's leading pediatric cardiologists, a woman whose steady hands restarted the hearts of fragile infants, and whose quiet grace was the perfect calming counterpoint to her husband's explosive energy. They were the ultimate power couple, a perfectly balanced equation of brilliance and beauty, steel and silk. Irene remembered the man she had fallen in love with. He wasn't this titan of industry. He was a scholarship student with restless energy, a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius in his backpack and eyes that held a galaxy of dreams. They met in the hushed cathedral of a university library, their connection forged over cheap ramen and whispered late-night debates about philosophy and the future. He had been brilliant then too, but his brilliance was alloyed with a warmth and a vulnerability that had since been smelted away, leaving only the hard, polished metal of his ambition. The man who quoted Roman emperors had been replaced by a man who spoke only in the language of quarterly earnings and measured his affection in the carats of the diamonds he periodically draped around her neck. The gilded cage had been built so slowly, so luxuriously, that she hadn't noticed the bars closing in. The penthouse, the couture gowns, the chauffeured cars, they were beautiful distractions from the growing emptiness. Dinners in their cavernous dining room became exercises in performance, with Alex recounting his corporate triumphs while Irene arranged her features into a mask of wifely admiration. The silence between them was no longer comfortable. It was a vacuum filled only by the distant city traffic. The cracks in their perfect facade began as hairline fractures visible only to her. The late nights at the office, once a shared sacrifice for their future, became his solitary pursuit with vague explanations and a new, impenetrable password on his phone. He had always worn a subtle sandalwood cologne, a scent she associated with safety and home. Then one day, he came home smelling different, a sharp, aggressive citrus. "What's the new scent?" she'd asked casually, helping him off with his coat. He'd waved a dismissive hand, not meeting her eye. Something they were handing out at the hotel in Dubai. Just trying it out. A cold knot formed in her stomach. He hadn't been to Dubai in 6 months. It was a small lie, clumsy and unnecessary, which made it all the more alarming. It was a lie of convenience, the kind you tell when the truth is simply too complicated to bother with. Another crack appeared a month later. While tidying his study, a receipt from a boutique jeweler she'd never heard of fluttered out from a stack of papers. It was for a pair of breathtaking emerald and diamond earrings, an extravagant purchase she had never seen for an occasion that had never occurred. She stared at the slip of paper, her heart a trip hammer in her chest. It wasn't the cost that stunned her, but the intimacy of the lie. This wasn't a business expense. This was a gift. A secret gift. The final piece of her denial crumbled on an ordinary Tuesday. Irene was preparing for a presentation and needed to access a file she'd emailed to her personal account. Her own laptop was at the hospital, so she looked for the shared family iPad, a device they rarely used. She found it tucked deep inside the side pocket of Alex's briefcase, a place it had no reason to be. A flicker of premonition, cold and sharp, went through her as she powered it on. The screen lit up and her world fell away. His iMessage account was open-synced from his phone. The screen showed the last active conversation, not with his business partner Marcus or his assistant, but with a name that was a blank slate to her, Chloe Jensen. The last message sent from Alex's phone was only an hour old. It was a reply to a photo of a smiling, stunningly beautiful blonde woman, a woman no older than 25, posing on the balcony of their Hamptons beach house. Her beach house. The one her parents had left her, a sacred space of childhood memories. Chloe's message above the photo read, "Thinking of our weekend. Wish you were here instead of in that stuffy boardroom. X." Alex's reply, "Soon, Starlight. All of this will be ours soon." Irene's breath hitched. Her fingers, trembling uncontrollably, began to scroll upwards, moving backwards in time, unraveling the tapestry of her husband's secret life. It was all there. Months of it. A torrent of sickening intimacy, pet names, shared jokes, and clandestine plans. "Chloe, I hate being your secret, Alex. It makes me feel cheap." Alex, "Never cheap. You are my future. This thing with Irene, it's a legacy partnership now. Purely business. It has to be dismantled carefully, for the company. Chloe, I just want to be able to wake up with you and not have you rush off before the sun comes up." Alex, "The Sterling Tower deal is the key that unlocks everything. Once it's closed, I'm untouchable. We are untouchable. I can finally give you the life you deserve. My future wife deserves nothing less. My future wife." The three words seemed to lift off the screen and strike her physically. The air was forced from her lungs and she sank to her knees on the cold marble of the foyer, the iPad clutched in her hands like a sacred text of betrayal. It wasn't just a sordid affair. It was a coup. A meticulously planned replacement. She was not his wife. She was a legacy partner, a corporate entity to be managed and eventually dissolved. The Sterling Tower. His crowning achievement, the monument to his ego that was set to pierce the Manhattan sky, was to be the tombstone of their marriage. A wave of nausea and grief washed over her, so profound it was debilitating. But then something else stirred in the abyss. It was a cold, quiet fury that began to crystallize in her veins. The naive girl from the library was long gone, but the cardiologist who held failing hearts in her hands, who fought death with science and sheer bloody-minded will, was very much alive. She would not be dismantled. She would not crumble. She would not go quietly. In the 3 weeks that followed, Irene became the greatest actress of her career. She moved through her life with a chilling, otherworldly calm, a perfect Stepford wife. She smiled at Alex's self-congratulatory monologues about zoning laws and investor calls, her face a mask of serene interest. Inside, she was a general planning a war. Her first move was to contact Frank Miller, a discreet private investigator recommended by a colleague who had navigated her own brutal divorce. His office was a cluttered, dusty walk-up in Queens, a world away from her pristine penthouse. "I'm not looking for photos I can sell to the tabloids." Frank, she'd said, her voice even and low, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. "I'm not interested in his indiscretions. I'm interested in his transactions. I want to know where every dollar he has spent on this woman has come from. I need a paper trail. I need leverage." Her second call was to Sofia Rostova. They met in a dark, moody wine bar in Tribeca, the kind of place Alex, with his preference for ostentatious see-and-be-seen establishments, would never set foot in. Irene laid out the entire story, the iPad's damning evidence, a spectral presence between them. Sophia listened without interruption, her intelligent eyes fixed on Irene's face. When Irene finished, Sophia slowly shook her head, a single perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched in disbelief. Future wife. She breathed, her voice dripping with contempt. The sheer unmitigated gall. Men like Alex believe they are gods creating worlds. They forget that sometimes the ground they're standing on is owned by someone else. She took a long, thoughtful sip of her wine. You can't just leave him, Ellie. That's what he expects. A tearful confrontation, a quiet settlement. You have to detonate your life with him. Publicly. His party. Irene said, the idea taking shape in her mind. To celebrate the Sterling Tower closing. It's on a yacht. He's named it the Vindication. Sophia's eyes lit up with a fierce, predatory gleam. Oh, that is exquisite. A floating monument to his own ego. A captive audience of every person who matters to him. It's not just a stage, Ellie. It's a gallows. And he's building it for himself. The night of the party arrived on a thick, humid wave of July air. The Vindication was an obscene marvel of white fiberglass and polished mahogany, a floating palace moored at Chelsea piers. Irene selected her armor with the precision of a surgeon choosing a scalpel. It was a column of emerald green silk that clung to her form, a color that made her auburn hair blaze and her eyes flash like chips of jade. It was a dress Alex would hate, too bold, too commanding. She fastened the diamond necklace he'd given her for their 10th anniversary around her neck. Tonight it felt less like a gift and more like a collar she was about to break. He was waiting for her in the grand foyer of the penthouse, already dressed in a tuxedo that made him look like a movie star. His eyes swept over her, an appreciative if distracted gleam in them. Incredible Elle, he said, kissing the air beside her cheek. A perfect queen for a perfect night. My queen. The dramatic irony was so thick she could taste it. It's your night, Alex, she said, her smile feeling sharp and brittle. Your vindication. On the yacht he was a king holding court, basking in the adulation of his subjects. Irene watched him from a distance, a detached observer at what she knew was her own public execution. She nursed a single glass of champagne, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She saw him check his phone repeatedly, a small, eager smile on his lips. He was looking for her. The other one. And then Irene saw her. Chloe Jensen stood near the stern, looking both overwhelmed and incandescently happy in a white dress that was just a shade too bridal. She was beautiful, Irene had to admit, with the heartbreaking radiance of youth and misplaced hope. Chloe's eyes scanned the crowd, searching until they finally locked with Alex's. A current of illicit energy passed between them, so potent and so obvious that Irene felt a fresh wave of sickness. Just after the sun bled below the horizon, the speeches began. Marcus Thorne gave a rambling, sycophantic toast. Then Alex took the microphone, his face illuminated, his voice booming with triumph. He spoke of his vision, his will, his legacy. Then his tone shifted, becoming intimate. He spoke of the future, of clarity, of passion, and of starting a new chapter with honesty. A confused murmur rippled through the guests. They looked from Alex to Irene and back again. His eyes found Chloe in the crowd, and he smiled, a dazzling, genuine smile reserved only for her. Chloe, he said, his voice ringing across the deck. Come here. As the girl in white walked toward him through the stunned parting crowd, Irene felt the world slow down. This was the moment, the end he had scripted for her. A quiet, dignified crumbling, a humiliating retreat. He took Chloe's hand, pulled her to his side, and faced the sea of baffled faces. He gave a cursory, dismissive nod in Irene's direction. Many of you know my wife Irene, he said. But my future, my life, my heart, belongs to this woman. He beamed at Chloe. Everyone, I would like you to meet Chloe Jensen, my future wife. The collective gasp of 200 people sucked the air from the deck. In the ringing silence that followed, Irene stood perfectly still. She saw the pity, the shock, the burgeoning whispers. She saw her husband's triumphant, arrogant face. He thought he had won. He thought she was finished. He had forgotten who she was. With a calm that felt as if it belonged to someone else, she placed her untouched champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray. She took one step, then another, her emerald dress a silent hiss of silk against the teak deck. She walked directly toward the stage. Alex watched her, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, expecting tears or a scene. She walked right past him. She stopped at the secondary lectern where the MC had left his microphone. She picked it up. Its cool metallic weight in her hand was a grounding force. She tapped it once. The sharp thump-thump echoed over the water, a sound that made every head snap in her direction. Alex's smile was gone, replaced by a mask of utter disbelief. Every eye on the vessel was on her. Irene took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of powerful, shocked faces, and brought the microphone to her lips. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice as clear and steady as a cardiac monitor. "For those of you who may be confused by the unexpected announcement, allow me to clarify. My name is Dr. Irene Parker, and contrary to what you've just heard, I am very much, and for the foreseeable future, Alexander Sterling's current wife." The word wife landed on the deck of the Vindication with the force of a physical impact. It was a single, perfectly enunciated syllable that shattered the fragile reality Alexander Sterling had constructed. The stunned silence that had fallen over the crowd deepened into something thicker, heavier, a collective intake of breath from the city's most powerful lungs. Chloe Jensen's face, which had been a portrait of blissful triumph, crumpled. The joy drained away, replaced by a ghastly white mask of confusion as she stared at the elegant, composed woman holding the microphone as if she were born to it. Alex, for a moment, was paralyzed. He looked at Irene as if she were an apparition, a ghost at his victory feast. "Irene," he hissed, his voice a low, furious tremor that barely carried. "What are you doing? Stop this right now." She gave him no more attention than she would a buzzing fly. Her gaze remained fixed on her audience, her jury. Her voice, when she spoke again, was imbued with a chillingly calm authority that commanded absolute attention. "I'd like to thank you all for coming to celebrate the Sterling Tower," she continued, a faint, ironic smile touching her lips. "It truly is a monumental achievement. A legacy, as Alex so eloquently puts it. And legacies, as we all know, are built on strong foundations. They require vision, will, and quite often capital." The word capital shifted the atmosphere. The investors, men who lived and died by that word, straightened their backs. The socialites leaned in, their eyes gleaming with the promise of a scandal far more delicious than mere infidelity. This was about to get expensive. "My husband is a man of great vision," Irene said finally, turning her head to pin Alex with a look of pure, unadulterated ice. "He sees what he wants, and he builds it. But it's important for everyone here to understand how the very first brick of his empire was laid." Her voice dropped, becoming intimate, conspiratorial, drawing the crowd into her confidence. 10 years ago, when Sterling Properties was just an ambitious idea in a 2-room office, Alex was a brilliant dreamer with empty pockets. The seed money, the $2 million that secured the first crucial loan that allowed him to purchase the first small properties that would one day become this empire, didn't come from a venture capitalist. She paused, letting the suspense build, letting every person on that yacht hang on her next word. "It came from me." A wave of murmurs washed over the deck. This wasn't just a marital spat. This was a founding dispute. It was my inheritance left to me by my parents. Irene clarified, her voice ringing with the clarity of a courtroom proclamation. "I invested in him, in his dream. Out of love, yes, but also as a partner. I became a silent founding partner in everything Sterling Properties was and will be. An investment that as of this moment I am calling due." The implication was a lightning strike. She then turned her focus to Marcus Thorne, who looked as if he might spontaneously combust from sheer panic. "Marcus," she said, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "My 25% founding stake, which I've noticed has been conveniently diluted and recategorized over the years, a practice I never consented to in writing, will be the primary subject of discussion when my legal team contacts yours on Monday morning. I do hope your files are in pristine order." Marcus paled, visibly swaying on his feet. The other investors began to exchange panicked glances. They weren't watching a soap opera. They were witnessing a hostile takeover. Finally, Irene's gaze fell upon Chloe, who stood frozen, a deer caught in the blinding headlights of a catastrophe she couldn't comprehend. Irene's tone softened, not with kindness, but with a terrifying clinical pity. "And as for you, Miss Jensen, a piece of advice from a woman who knows him better than you ever will. When a man promises you the future, you must first ensure he holds the deed to the present. The penthouse you've been enjoying on Tuesday afternoons. The deed is in my name. The beach house in the Hamptons where you took those lovely photos. It's been in my family since 1982. The opulent life he dangled before you, my dear, was never his to give away." She placed the microphone back onto the lectern with a quiet, definitive click. The sound echoed in the crushing silence. She had not raised her voice. She had not shed a tear. She had systematically and with surgical precision dismantled Alexander Sterling's life, his career, and his future in less than 3 minutes. Then she turned and walked away. The crowd parted for her as if she were Moses parting the Red Sea. Her emerald green dress flowed behind her, a banner of righteous fury. As she passed the bar, she caught Sophia's eye. Her friend raised her martini glass in a slow, deliberate salute, her expression one of fierce, unadulterated pride. The spell shattered. The second Irene's heel touched the gangplank. Alex, jolted out of his stupor by a tidal wave of public humiliation, found his voice. "Irene!" He roared, his face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "You will regret this." She never broke her stride. The threat, loud and brutish, only served to underscore the power of her quiet, elegant departure. A black town car summoned by Sophia an hour earlier purred at the curb. The chauffeur held the door, and Irene slid inside. As the heavy door closed, shutting out the chaos, she finally let out a single shuddering breath. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving in its place the vast, aching void of a decade-long love that had just been declared dead. But through the immense grief, a new feeling flickered to life, the incandescent burn of liberation. Back on the Vindication, pandemonium erupted. The party was over. The air of celebration had curdled into one of impending doom. Guests, smelling the blood in the water, began a mass exodus, desperate to distance themselves from the Sterling implosion. Investors huddled in tight, anxious circles, their BlackBerries already lighting up with messages to their own lawyers. Alex, wild-eyed and shaking with fury, turned on the most immediate target. "You," he snarled at Chloe, grabbing her arm. "What did you know about this? Did you know about her money?" "No!" Chloe cried, yanking her arm away. The tears she'd been holding back now streaming down her face, carving black paths through her makeup. "You told me she was nothing. A society wife. You said it was all you. Your company. Your money. Get off my yacht!" He spat, the words dripping with venom. The possessive pronoun my already sounded absurd. He was a king whose kingdom had just been revealed to be a hologram. Chloe stumbled backward, the crowd shrinking away from her as if she were contagious. The woman who had arrived as the blushing future wife was now a public spectacle of shame. She navigated the gauntlet of whispers and hostile stares, her bridal white dress now feeling like a costume for a fool. She was collateral damage, a pawn who had been sacrificed in the opening move of a war she never knew existed. Alex's phone buzzed violently. It was Marcus. "What the hell did you just let happen, Alex?" Marcus's voice was a panicked squeak. "Is it true? The seed money, her 25%. It was a gift, Marcus. A marital asset." Alex yelled, pacing the deck like a caged tiger. "A $2 million gift from before the company was even incorporated isn't a marital asset. You moron, it's a founding investment. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Our key investors just heard that the origin story of this company is a lie. The entire Sterling Tower financing package is built on the perceived stability of our holdings. If she files an injunction, if she freezes your assets while she sues for her stake, we're not just in trouble, Alex. We're finished. the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. The full scope of his miscalculation crashed down on him. He had mistaken Irene's grace for weakness, her silence for submission. He had seen the gentle doctor and forgotten about the formidable intellect, the daughter of a notoriously cunning litigator. He hadn't just provoked his wife, he had awakened an enemy he never knew he had. Monday morning arrived not with the promise of a new week, but with the declaration of war. A team of lawyers from Croft & Levine, the city's most feared marital and corporate law firm, descended with overwhelming force. Julian Croft, a silver-haired shark with a reputation for bleeding arrogant billionaires dry, was leading the charge personally. The first volley was a petition for discovery filed at the courthouse at 9:01 a.m. By 10:30 a.m., a courier arrived at Alex's office and served him with a court order. It was an emergency injunction freezing a significant portion of his personal and corporate assets, pending a full financial review. He was in effect locked out of his own treasury. The media, fed by the dozens of high-profile witnesses from the party, went into a feeding frenzy. "My sea drop heard round the world, wife's revenge sinks." "Tycoon's empire," screamed the cover of the New York Post, "the Sterling War." How a billion-dollar real estate empire was upended by a shocking spousal claim, read the more sober headline in the Wall Street Journal. Irene, secluded in a quiet suite at the Carlyle paid for by Sophia, became a strategist. She met with her teams around the clock. Frank Miller, the PI, delivered his final report. It was even more damning than she'd imagined. He hadn't just found receipts. He had unspooled the entire corporate structure of Starbright Holdings Limited. In the suite surrounded by her legal and financial advisors, Irene looked at the flowcharts connecting Sterling Properties to the offshore account, and from there to Chloe's condo car and credit cards. It was a clear, undeniable map of his deceit. Julian Croft looked at her, his expression grim, but his eyes gleaming with a predator's anticipation. "This changes the game, Irene," he said, tapping the documents. "This is no longer a simple, albeit high-stakes divorce. This is a clear pattern of fraudulent conveyance. He wasn't just spending marital money. He was actively and illegally siphoning funds from a corporation in which you are a founding partner. He was stealing from you to build a life with her." Irene stared at the proof, the cold, hard facts of his betrayal. The pain was still there, a deep, resonant ache. But it was now overlaid with something else. A cold, clarifying anger. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had tried to make a fool of her. "This isn't just about my 25% anymore, is it, Julian?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "No," Croft confirmed. "This is about everything. We can argue that his actions have jeopardized the entire company. We have grounds to petition the court to have him removed entirely." The path forward was clear. Alex had started a fire thinking she would be consumed by it. He never imagined she would pick up the torch and use it to burn his kingdom to the ground. The days immediately following the yacht party were a maelstrom. The story, too juicy and dramatic to be contained, exploded across the city's media landscape. It was a perfect storm of wealth, sex, and public betrayal, and New York was ravenous. The conflict became known simply as the War of the Sterlings. A battle fought not with armies but with lawyers' leaks and narratives spun for public consumption. Alexander Sterling, accustomed to being the master of his own story, found himself frighteningly outmaneuvered. He was trapped in a narrative not of his own making. Paparazzi swarmed his office building, their camera flashes like tiny, persistent explosions. His mornings were spent with his lawyer, the perpetually aggressive Rick Esposito, trying to plug the leaks in his sinking reputation. Their strategy was crude and predictable: throw mud and hope some of it sticks. Anonymous friends of Alex began whispering to gossip columnists, painting a pathetic picture of a lonely, neglected husband. Irene, they claimed, was married to her career, an ice queen who preferred the sterile environment of a hospital to the warmth of her own home. They portrayed her mic drop moment not as a calculated act of strength but as a long-simmering hysterical outburst. But the narrative was flimsy. It buckled under the weight of Irene's public persona. To the world, she wasn't a hysteric. She was a respected pediatric cardiologist. This fundamental truth became the bedrock of her own far more effective counteroffensive. While Alex hid Irene controlled. Guided by Julian Croft and the shrewd PR instincts of Sophia, she agreed to a single carefully orchestrated interview. She chose a veteran female journalist known for her incisive but fair reporting. The setting was not a glitzy studio, but her office at the hospital, the walls adorned with children's drawings and medical degrees. She wore her white coat. The image was one of competence, compassion, and unwavering professionalism. "They're calling your husband's affair a cry for help." From a lonely man, the journalist probed her question sharp. Irene didn't flinch. Her hands were folded calmly on her desk. "My husband is a grown man who makes his own choices," she said, her tone measured. "But this situation has evolved far beyond marital strife. This is about a breach of fiduciary duty. When I invested my inheritance in his dream, I became his first business partner. The trust between partners is sacred. The use of company funds to finance a secret life isn't a cry for help. It's fraud." She had, in one calm statement, reframed the entire debate. The salacious details of the affair became secondary to the cold, hard facts of financial crime. She was not the scorned wife. She was the protector of a business and investor safeguarding her assets from a reckless CEO. The public and, more importantly, the financial world listened. The legal front was a war of 1,000 paper cuts. Subpoenas flew like confetti. Every transaction, every email, every board meeting minute from the last decade was scrutinized by Irene's forensic accountants. The Cayman Islands shell corporation Starbright Holdings Limited was the smoking gun. Frank Miller's meticulous investigation had laid the groundwork, and now the accountants were building a fortress of evidence upon it. The pressure fell squarely on Marcus Thorne. As a partner and board member, his signature was on documents that in retrospect looked deeply suspect. He was served with a subpoena that was less a request and more a threat. Faced with the choice between loyalty to a friend who had lied to him and saving himself from potential prosecution, Marcus made the only rational decision. He confronted Alex in his office, the same office that had once been a symbol of their shared success. Now it felt like a bunker. Marcus didn't mince words. He threw a folder thick with bank statements onto Alex's polished desk. "Starbright Holdings, Alex." Marcus said, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. "You told me it was an exploratory fund for a potential Dubai expansion. But there's no expansion. There's just a Soho condo, a Mercedes, and a $500,000 Cartier bill. You funneled company money. Our money. The investors' money." Alex attempted to bluster his way through. "It was a loan. I was going to pay it back." "It's just creative accounting, Marcus. We've been doing it for years." "No." Marcus shouted, his face turning a deep, unhealthy red. "You've been doing it. You lied to me. You exposed me, the board, and every investor we have to catastrophic liability. Irene's lawyers don't see creative accounting. They see wire fraud. They see racketeering. They are going to depose me, Alex. What am I supposed to do? Lie under oath for you. Commit perjury for your girlfriend's condo." It's over. The betrayal was a physical blow to Alex. Marcus was his man, his confidant, his oldest ally. To see him turn was to see the final bulkhead in his ship give way. "So you're just going to roll over? You're going to help her destroy me?" Alex asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "She's not the one who destroyed you, Alex," Marcus said, gathering his papers with a defeated finality. "You did. I'm just trying not to get buried in the rubble with you." As the legal and financial walls closed in on Alex, Chloe Jensen found herself in a different kind of prison. The glamorous life he had promised her had evaporated overnight. She was a social pariah, her name and face plastered everywhere, as the homewrecker who brought down a titan. The Soho condo, paid for by Starbright Holdings, became a legal liability, and she was evicted. The Mercedes was repossessed. Alex, once her passionate protector, now refused to even take her calls, viewing her as the living embodiment of his downfall. Alone, broke, and terrified, she spent her days in cheap coffee shops, nursing a single cup for hours, watching her life unravel on her phone. She was drowning, and the man who had promised her an ocean of happiness had thrown her overboard without a life raft. In her email, she still had the messages from Alex. Boastful, arrogant messages where he detailed how he was moving money around to prepare for their new life. "Don't you worry about Ellie," one message read. "I've got my little magic trick. A corporate expense here, an offshore transfer there. By the time the lawyers get involved, the accounts she can touch will be squeaky clean. It's a shell game, Starlight, and she doesn't even know she's playing." This email, which she had once found thrilling and romantic, now looked like what it was: a confession. It was the only thing of value she had left. In a final act of desperate self-preservation, she found the number for Croft and Levine. Her hands trembling, she made the call that would serve as the final nail in Alexander Sterling's coffin. Alex, sensing the shift from a battle he could win to a rout, became a cornered animal. With his finances frozen, his allies deserting him, and the threat of Chloe's testimony looming, he made a fatal error. He decided that if he was going down, he would drag Irene down into the mud with him. He couldn't attack her finances or her legal position, so he attacked her soul. He and Esposito hired a bottom-feeding private investigator, a man who specialized in character assassination. When they found no legitimate flaw in Irene's impeccable career, they simply invented one. The blow came on a Tuesday morning. Irene was in the middle of her rounds at the hospital discussing a complex case with a young, promising resident, Dr. Ben Carter. She began to notice a change in the atmosphere. Nurses whispered as she passed, their eyes darting away when she looked at them. A fellow senior physician gave her a look of pity that made her stomach clench. It was Sophia who broke the news. She stormed into the small office Irene used for paperwork, her face a mask of thunder, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. She didn't say a word, just handed Irene the phone. The screen displayed a notorious gossip blog, the kind that thrived on innuendo and destruction. The headline was, "Vile, Heartless Healer Dr. Parker's Inappropriate Bedside Manner Under Scrutiny." The article, citing an anonymous hospital insider, was a disgusting tapestry of lies, insinuating she was having an affair with the very resident she had just been mentoring. It hinted at a hospital investigation, painting her as a predator who used her position of power. It was a lie so perfectly crafted to mirror Alex's own transgressions that its cruelty was breathtaking. Irene felt the blood drain from her face. This was not the boardroom or the courtroom. This was her sanctuary. Her work was the one part of her life that was pure, that was hers alone. He had invaded it. He had desecrated it. For the first time since the night on the yacht, she felt a profound, shattering wave of despair. "This is his work," she whispered, the phone slipping from her numb fingers. "He knows this is the only thing that could ever truly hurt me." "Of course it's him, Ellie," Sophia spat, her voice vibrating with rage. "This is what desperate, pathetic men do. They can't win on the facts, so they try to destroy your character." He crossed a line. A sacred line. Irene looked up, and the tears that had threatened for weeks finally fell. They were not tears of sadness, but of white-hot fury. The grief was cauterized in that moment, replaced by something cold and hard and absolute. The part of her that still felt a shred of pity for the man she once loved died. Sophia put a hand on her shoulder. "The hospital will issue a denial. Your career is safe because you've done nothing wrong. But this changes the rules of engagement." Irene wiped her eyes, her expression hardening into a mask of pure resolve. "You're right." She picked up her own phone and dialed Julian Croft. Sophia could hear the icy calm in her friend's voice as she spoke. "Julian, it's Irene, the affidavit from Chloe Jensen, the one you were holding as leverage." She paused, taking a deep, steadying breath. "It's time to detonate it. I want to schedule the deposition immediately. No more offers, no more negotiations. I want him in a room under oath. I want to end this." Sophia watched her friend, no longer seeing a victim. The war of attrition was over. Alex had launched a nuclear strike on the one thing she held sacred, and in doing so, he had just authorized her to unleash her own apocalypse. The settlement was not a negotiation, it was an autopsy. The sterile conference room with its panoramic view of a city that no longer felt like his had become Alexander Sterling's morgue. The atmosphere was thick with the ghost of his former power. His lawyer Rick Esposito, who had once prowled around such rooms like a caged panther, now sat hunched. His arguments reduced to feeble murmurs about tax implications and transfer schedules. He was no longer a bulldog. He was a clerk processing the terms of his client's unconditional surrender. Across the vast mahogany table, Irene's team operated with the dispassionate precision of a surgical unit. Julian Croft dictated the terms, his voice a calm, unyielding force. They weren't just winning, they were redacting Alex from his own life story. The evidence of fraud was the fulcrum, and Croft used it to leverage every last concession. Irene sat through it all, a study in stillness. She listened as they carved up the empire she had unwittingly funded. At one point, her financial advisor presented two options: a full liquidation of her stake, which would net her a 9-figure sum and allow her to walk away clean, or a more complex corporate maneuver. The second option, the advisor explained, pointing to a complex flowchart, is a forced buyout. We use the settlement value which Alex cannot pay to execute a debt-for-equity swap. It's aggressive. It would mean taking control of the company. Esposito scoffed weakly. She's a doctor. She doesn't want to run a real estate conglomerate. Irene's gaze, cool and direct, met Esposito's across the table. Don't presume to tell me what I want. She turned to her team. We proceed with option 2. The decision hung in the air, more shocking than any demand for money. It was a checkmate Alex had never conceived. He had assumed she wanted revenge money freedom. He never imagined she would want his throne. In that moment, he finally understood. This wasn't about punishing him for his infidelity. It was about her reclaiming what she had built. The company wasn't just an asset. It was her legacy too, and she refused to let it crumble into dust with him. The final signing took place a month later in a smaller, even more suffocating room at Croft's firm. It was just the two of them and their respective lawyers. The air crackled with a decade of shared history and unsaid things. Alex looked hollowed out. The bespoke suit hung loosely on his frame, the confident posture replaced by a weary slump. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month, haunted by the consequences of his own arrogance. He signed the documents with a shaky hand, his signature once, a bold, aggressive slash, now a timid scrawl. As he pushed the final page across the table, his eyes met Irene's. The fury was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading despair. "You've taken everything, Irene," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper that barely carried across the polished wood. Irene looked at him, truly, looked at him for the first time without the filter of love or betrayal. She saw a man diminished not by her actions, but by the revelation of his own character. "You're wrong, Alex," she replied, her voice steady and devoid of malice. It was the voice of a physician delivering a difficult diagnosis. "You didn't have anything that was truly yours for me to take. The company was built on my family's money. The homes we lived in were secured by my name. The reputation you enjoyed was built on the foundation of my grace and my silence." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "All you had was the illusion of power, a reflection you saw in the eyes of people who wanted something from you. You surrounded yourself with mirrors, and you thought it was a kingdom. When you tried to trade me in for a newer model, you didn't just break our marriage. You shattered the mirrors. This is what was left behind." She gestured to the pile of papers that legally erased him from his own life. "Goodbye, Alex." With that, she stood, gave a slight nod to her lawyer, and walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving him alone with the wreckage. The weeks that followed were about sweeping up the debris. Chloe Jensen was a loose thread Irene wanted tied off not out of pity, but for a sense of absolute closure. She had Julian Croft's office contact, Chloe's pro bono lawyer. A trust was established, modest, anonymous, and untraceable back to Irene. It was enough for a plane ticket, a security deposit on an apartment in a city where no one knew her name, and the chance to start over. It was a final silent transaction that wiped the last remnants of Alex's affair from her ledger. Her first board meeting as chairperson of the newly renamed Parker Properties was surreal. She walked into the room where her husband's portrait had once hung. In its place was a neutral, abstract painting she had chosen. Marcus Thorne, now the acting CEO, stood to greet her. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hard-won respect. "Dr. Parker." "Irene," he said, correcting himself. "Welcome, Marcus," she acknowledged with a nod. "Let's get to work." She was a natural. Her mind trained to diagnose complex systems and make life-or-death decisions under pressure, cut through corporate jargon and financial obfuscation with ease. She wasn't interested in vanity projects like the Sterling Tower. She pivoted the company, investing in sustainable urban development and medical research facilities. She was building a legacy of substance, not just spectacle. The first casualty of her new life was the penthouse. It sold in a week. Walking through its vast, empty rooms for the last time, she felt a pang, not of loss, but of nostalgia for the young woman who had believed so fiercely in a lie. She had thought this apartment was the pinnacle of her life, when in fact, it had been the most beautiful cage. She found her new home in the West Village. It was a 4-story brownstone with ivy climbing the facade, a slightly overgrown garden in the back, and floors that creaked with history. It was everything the penthouse was not: warm, intimate, and real. She filled the shelves with books, not awards, and hung art that she loved, not art that was an investment. 6 months after the ink had dried on the divorce, Sophia came for dinner. They sat in the garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The city lights began to twinkle, but here, surrounded by brick walls and the rustling leaves of a Japanese maple, it felt peaceful. "I saw a picture of him the other day," Sophia said, breaking a comfortable silence. She swirled the deep red wine in her glass. "Page 6 online. He was at some C-list party in Miami. He looked smaller. He looked smaller." Irene knew exactly what she meant. Alex's power had been a costume. Without the title, the company, and her backing, he was just a man in a suit, and the suit didn't fit anymore. "The shadow is gone," Irene said softly. "So all you can see is the man who was casting it." Sophia raised her glass. "To seeing things as they really are." They clinked glasses, the crystal chiming in the quiet air. So Sophia asked, her voice gentle, her sharp eyes searching Irene's face. "The big question. Are you happy, Ellie?" Irene looked up at the sliver of moon visible between the city buildings. The word happy felt too simple, too trite for the complex tapestry of her new reality. The scar of Alex's betrayal remained a reminder of her own capacity for naivety, a lesson etched into her soul. But the constant low-grade ache of a life half-lived was gone. "I'm free," she finally answered, and the word felt like a deep, clean breath. Happiness comes and goes. It's a visitor. But freedom is the house you live in. For 10 years, I was the silent partner in my own life, my name a quiet addendum to his. Now, she smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. Now I'm the CEO. She had walked onto that yacht a wife. She had walked off a warrior. And in the quiet aftermath of the war, she had rebuilt a world not from the ashes of her old life, but on the unshakable foundation of her own strength. She was home. Irene Parker's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest strength is often forged in the deepest betrayal. She didn't just get mad, she got everything. By refusing to be a silent victim, she rewrote her own narrative from one of humiliation to one of ultimate triumph. Her story isn't just about a divorce. It's about reclaiming your power, your name, and your future when someone tries to steal it from you. What do you think? Was Irene's public takedown a moment of epic justice or a step too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story as compelling as we did, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction.